What is up, guys? It is Sosa MMA back at you with another video. This time it is a recap of UFC 299, and without getting into any of the fights, what a crazy card. I really feel like every fight on this main card delivered in one way or another, and it was just an amazing experience from start to finish. But we are going to break down the performances of every fighter on the main card and then also talk about who they should face next, starting with your champion at bantamweight who defended his belt, Sean O'Malley. Now, when you talk about Sean O'Malley, what's really impressive about this performance, there's so many things you could talk about because it was pretty one-sided all the way throughout. But first and foremost, over the course of a 25-minute fight with two elite strikers, you would normally see a variety of weapons employed by both men, and you would see some of those weapons succeed early and then begin to get countered as the fight goes on and then fail. And then some of those strategies fail early but begin to get set up better and then work as the fight goes on. But that wasn't really the case on Sean O'Malley's side or Chito Vera's side. We'll talk about Chito Vera individually in a second. But for Sean O'Malley, every weapon he wanted to use in this fight worked pretty much. The only weapon that he used early on that he didn't use later was his leg kicks, but they didn't stop working. He just largely stopped using them as the fight went on, as compared to the rest of his strikes, which he threw a volume of throughout this fight. Furthermore, you also saw something that was incredible in that he was able to discipline Chito not only with his power but with a variety of strikes. So on the note of power, that's remarkable because we've seen Chito fight so many people who could have put power on him in one way or another. I didn't think there was anybody in those fights who could knock him out, but Song Yadong never made Chito's face look like it did. We'll look at Chito's face in a little bit. Nobody ever landed a knee on him like that did, like Sean did rather in round two. And in round two as well, after that knee, while that somehow miraculously didn't knock him down, it did break his face. And it also made it to where later on in the round when Sean landed a right hand, he did get sat down on his knee, like how Volkanovski did in his first fight with Makhachev, for example. So that was remarkable to see him do that in that capacity, which also had Chito later on in the fight biting on feints. It was noted by the commentary early that as Chito Vera does, he wasn't really biting on a lot of Sean's feints, but Sean is one of the best people at selling his feints in the UFC, and I think a large part of that comes down to how much he hurts these guys and in how convincing a lot of his fakes are. You can actually see him in round two set up the sequence where he lands that knee by faking a knee. And then when Chito Vera puts up his defenses expecting a knee to the body, Sean punches him right in the face and gets right through his guard. So then Chito thinks, okay, well, when he goes for that knee feint, then he's just going to punch me in the face. So the next time that Sean goes for that knee feint, Chito blocks his face, but in the way to try and block a strike, but the knee goes just straight through that as he ducks down to also try and dodge that jab. And he just ducks straight into that knee, which really, to be honest with you, would have knocked out any other bantamweight in the world, probably including Sean O'Malley. I can't imagine his chin is enough to survive that. It's inhuman that Chito was able to live through that. It's remarkable that he did. But it was remarkable nonetheless that Sean was able to be successful with really everything. His long attacks worked, whether it was his straights, his jabs, his teeps to the body. He even had some near success with front kicks to the face, but he never really landed anything significant there. The knees obviously landed significantly several times. It was remarkable. He was even, as we'll talk about later, having success in ways that he typically doesn't in his fight. Most noteworthy, I would say, would be round kicks to the body. You see him throw a lot of front kicks to the body. It's kind of like the core pillar of his game, that and working around, changing positions and stances off of that, cutting angles and using the dart. His corner in this fight was referring to it as a Dillashaw, but typically that dart is what it's referred to, and he uses that dart and that sniper kind of movement and game plan. But in this fight, you saw him stray from that occasionally to jab, dip, land a couple of punches to the body, come up and maybe throw a strike to Chito's head before getting out of the pocket with him, which really strayed from his style in a really interesting way that he was still able to succeed with. And that really shows why he was doing that, because he knew that he could take those risks and still be successful throughout this fight. So that was pretty impressive to see him implementing new things to his striking game that we don't typically see him use and still be successful with them. Another really impressive thing was that his corner in between rounds told him, hey, you've got this 4 rounds to 0. Don't go crazy this round, because you don't have to, pretty much. But he still, throughout the entire 5th round, was looking for that finish the entire time. You could tell how badly he wanted it. He hurt Chito badly at the start of the round and stemmed all of the progress that he had made throughout the 4th round and making that his best round throughout the fight. The 5th round did not pick up where the 4th left off, and Chito was completely helpless in that round, except for a single left hook to the body that he landed, which did hurt Sean, but the only reason he was able to land that is because it was the last 10 seconds of the fight, and Sean was bravely standing in the pocket and brawling with him, trying to finish Chito because he knew that he had already won the fight. So he landed accurately as well in 2 different ways that are remarkable. One is that Chito is a remarkably difficult person to hit and hit cleanly. You heard Sean say that after this fight, and you heard Corey Sandhagen say that as well. And he fought Chito for 5 rounds too and beat the shit out of him in their fight as well. But not only did O'Malley land on him, he landed on him accurately and efficiently. I believe he threw somewhere in the realm of 350 strikes and landed on 230 of them, which is right around 60% accuracy, and that is crazy on that high of striking volume, especially with somebody as hard to hit and hit cleanly as Chito. Not only that, but he was also able to put him in the most danger we've ever seen Chito, dropping him to 1 knee, and also landing the 6th most strikes ever landed in a UFC fight on Chito Vera, one of the hardest people in bantamweight to hit and hit cleanly. And he looked comfortable and creative in there the whole time. One point he caught a kick from Chito Vera and then spun around and kicked Chito in the body off of it. That's another attack that he was using, was the spinning kicks, both high and low. And he had great success with those throughout the entire fight. So it looked incredible. I had a ton to say about this performance, but what I don't have a ton to say about is about who's next. He's next. Merab, the Machine Dawalishvili. And Ilya can cry because he has to fight featherweight contenders, but this is what Sean has to do next. He has to fight Merab. But I think that Merab opening as a 2-1 favorite is incredibly disrespectful to the champ, and you can mark me down early for Sean O'Malley by knockout in that fight. He's knocking Merab out. You can guarantee it. Let's talk about Chito Vera. Chito Vera got his ass kicked the whole fight. The only impressive thing about his performance was his chin. It's absurd he didn't get finished. He really is inhuman. He's the most durable fighter I've ever seen, for sure. And he did land that one nice body shot, but that was pretty much the only thing of significance he did. In round 3, towards the end, he started to have some success with some of his blitzes. And in round 4, he picked up where he left off to some extent. And was making it competitive with the champ through the early goings of the round and bloodied up his nose as well. But Sean O'Malley put on the volume on him in that round and ran away with it in the second half of that round, so you can't even score that round for him unless you're that judge who robbed Corey Sandhagen, that I guess you could score it for him, but that's literally the only shot. But literally those blitzes were the only thing that he did. Anytime he got any offense going, it was not consistent, did not seem to damage Sean O'Malley in any significant way, and the most he ever got was Sean O'Malley being more urgent to leave the pocket than he normally was, but then he would just circle out again and be fine, and Chito would not be able to capitalize off of getting his back to the fence or do anything. Leg kicks did not factor into this fight in any way for Chito. Did not appear that they were compromising Sean O'Malley's movement at any point in the fight. The body work never seemed to add up to the champ except for the very, very end with that one shot, and I don't think that was accumulation of body damage. It was literally just that one good shot, and I still think Sean would have been fine if the fight kept going, by the way, but if the fight had been going longer, Sean wouldn't have even been there for him to hit in the first place, because the only reason he was there is because Sean decided to be there. You had Chito almost land a front kick and almost land a knee. but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, and this was not it. That was his UFC title fight, and he did not capitalize on the opportunity. And when I say I don't want to see him fight anytime soon at all, I don't say that to like slander his performance or anything. It's because he took so much damage. I don't want to see him fight soon again at all, remotely, for that reason. I just don't want to see him, and I don't think it'll be sanctioned for a while too. He looks like Jesus on the cross from how brutalized his face is. He took a ton of damage. He was immediately hospitalized afterwards as well. But there's a couple of matchups. It's hard to say though. And this is a good point for me to say that some of these guys included, will appear on here several times. I will say with like caveats though when there are them, because he's going to be out for so long. I could see the Cejudo matchup making sense because I kind of see Cejudo being inactive. Like maybe he gets a booking, but it falls through, and then his timetable lines up with Chito's, or he just takes some time off anyways. But this matchup could make sense. And then Figgy, I see being more active. I see him beating Garbrandt and then maybe taking one more fight, and then Chito being back and ready. And this would be a great fight for us to be able to say that Figgy has earned a title shot. If he's beat Garbrandt and then has one more solid ranked win after that, I think that Chito Vera would be a great featherstone to say, hey, let's get Figgy in the title picture. But let's move on and talk about Dustin Poirier. I don't even really want to talk about the fight. He got put in trouble early, obviously. He pulled 80 million guillotines, obviously. He got none of them, obviously. But Benoit was unable to resist brawling with Dustin Poirier as he ran out of time in his eyes, and he got caught badly. But what I want to talk about is Dustin Poirier's resume. I have all of the important accolades here. I'm just going to go over some of the important ones. The top 4, I'm all going to go over. He's the only man to ever stop Holloway. It was by an arm triangle choke in round 1. He's the only man to ever knock out McGregor. Technically did it twice, but the second one was a doctor stoppage, as Conor notoriously cried out. But he did legitimately knock him out with punches 2 minutes, 32 seconds into their second fight. He's the only man to ever sub Michael Chandler. He did it by rear naked choke in round 3 of their fight. And now he's the only man to ever finish Benoit Saint Denis, doing it by punches 2 minutes and 32 seconds into the second round. That's remarkable. I have his notable wins there. You can feel free to read over those. They're incredible. Tied for most in lightweight knockouts. Tied for most Fight of the Night awards. His record in those, 8-1. Tied for third most knockouts overall in the UFC. Tied for 6th most bonuses. Tied 4th most finishes. Tied 4th most wins. And his only modern lightweight losses are to the best lightweight of all time, Khabib Nurmagomedov, the 3rd best lightweight of all time, Charles Oliveira, and Justin Gaethje, a man who he has a win over as well. Now, the reason I say all of this, hear me out, I wouldn't advocate for this if Dana hadn't messed up the lightweight booking so bad. But we all want to see Islam fight really bad, and he wants to fight in summer. Now, you might say, okay, but Charles Armon is a number 1 contenders match, and you have Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. That's the problem, though, because they're both happening on the same card, and that card is in April. That means that if, let's say that both guys come out of that, whoever wins, let's say Charles wins and Gaethje wins, and they're both unscathed. They just one-hit KO Armon and Max, right? They still then, in order to turn around for Islam in June, would have to train for 1 month after having just trained for another fight camp. So let's just pray that they don't have any injuries, either of those guys that they took the last fight on, sustained in camp, or anything like that. Or that they're not overtrained and sustain an injury during this camp for Islam. And let's hope that 1 month doing a faux Volkanovski Makhachev 2 isn't just going to completely decimate their chances against one of the most dangerous men on the planet in MMA. Let's just say that doesn't happen. Then they get in there and they have some odds of defeating Makhachev. Whereas Poirier, obviously, doesn't have as great of a chance as someone like Charles or Arman. I feel like the winner of that matchup probably has the greatest chance of dethroning Islam of any of the 5 guys in this equation. But he certainly has a better chance than either of them coming off of a 1-month camp. I mean, come on. And I wouldn't, again, advocate for it if it wasn't such a messed up booking and if it was anybody else but Dustin Poirier. He's a veteran of the game. He's getting towards the end of his career, and he just had a triumphant win, giving a guy ranked much lower than him a shot. There's certainly been less deserved title shots than this. I mean, Chito Vera just got a title shot beating Pedro Munoz, for crying out loud. Let's let Dustin Poirier have this one. If you don't want to do that, Conor McGregor's waiting here in the corner to ditch Michael Chandler, and we can do it a 4th time if that's what you'd rather do. But nothing else really makes sense for the Diamond. Everyone else at the top is booked. Making him fight another up-and-comer doesn't really make any sense. Doesn't really want to take any fights at welterweight. He's not cutting back down to featherweight. There's really nothing else for him. So, yeah, I mean, that's it. The only other thing would be that if Arman was to beat Charles, then a Charles rematch would be cool, and then that could get him a title shot if he was to beat Charles for sure. I guess if he wanted to beat Beneil, that would be fine too. I'm not saying that he would for sure beat Beneil. I think he would, but if he wanted to fight Beneil now, then that would be fine. But I don't think that he wants that fight now. That Beneil's coming off 2 knockout losses, given that he didn't want it when Beneil was on that big winning streak. So I don't know. Now let's talk about Benoit Saint Denis. Now I had the word fraud in the thumbnail next to him. I don't think that he's a fraud. I don't think he got fraud checked. I think that's disrespectful to say. I think he had a great first round, pressuring Dustin Poirier and getting him to the fence, making him just hang on to those dumbass guillotines. And he wasn't able to mount significant ground offense, but he was putting Poirier in bad situations. He was able to put some damage on Poirier as well, but I told you before the fight, his boxing defense is super weak, and what did he show you? Swinging and banging with Poirier in the pocket, got caught. I told you the BSD writers would be mad. I predicted it the entire time, and if you bet on BSD and didn't watch my video, you can blame yourself for that one, because it was going to happen. Now, did the staff play a role? Probably. Now, Muhammad Makayev came out and made a tweet. It can make you feel disoriented being on the antibiotics. It can destroy your gas tank. It can make it to where your punches really just don't have any juice on them at all. And that is one thing you heard Poirier say at the post-fight press conference that he was surprised by, is that he expected more punching power out of Benoit, that while he was strong in the wrestling, that he wasn't super positionally intelligent, which makes sense coming from someone who's fought someone with the jiu-jitsu, the likes of Charles Oliveira, and the ground control, the likes of Khabib. To not rate Benoit as highly as those guys definitely makes sense, but that the punching power was lacking, I wouldn't have expected necessarily, because while Benoit doesn't necessarily have like one-hitter quitter knockout power, he definitely has some power in his hands, so that to me shows some sign that the staff had a role to play. But let's not kid ourselves. This was going to happen no matter what. He was more than willing to stand in the pocket and bang with Poirier when he was there against the fence, not able to take him down. And that would have gotten him caught no matter what. And it doesn't matter how many antibiotics you're on, your chin can't withstand Dustin Poirier with antibiotics or without antibiotics if you're just swinging and banging and relying on your durability to beat Dustin Poirier. If you're relying on your chin and your heart to beat Dustin Poirier, you're fucked, buddy. I think he has potential, but this is way too soon, so I think I'd kind of like to see him fight a talented grappler. I think that could be a fun matchup to see. Maybe Benoit is on the end where he wants to keep the fight standing for once. Maybe he has a chance to show off his striking, really refine it over the course of a camp. And now I think Gamrot is a matchup, and you might say, well, he's ranked higher than Benoit, and he just lost to Poirier. What gives? Why give him another shot? So Gamrot almost got murdered by RDA, so there you go. And Gamrot really hasn't actually beat anybody. So really the worst thing that can happen to Benoit is that he just detonates, Gamrot just detonates his knee with his mind powers like he did to Fiziev. So that would be a bad outcome. You could also do Dariush. Again, he's ranked higher, but he is coming off of 2 knockout losses, and you know that Dariush is game to take that matchup. Feels kind of fucked up to do to Dariush, though, so it's not my preference for this. It's just a matchup I could see them doing, and one that I could see being interesting, too, if Dariush is able to mitigate the head kick threat of Benoit, make it a boxing fight while it's on the feet, and just shut down his grappling. Then that could be a really good fight for Beneil to bounce back with as well. But the last matchup was kind of the last one I thought of. It was kind of like not super on my mind, but it's kind of the one I like most. Like, why don't we do Grant Dawson, bro? Just let both of these prospects rebound, you know? One of them has to get a win here. Grant Dawson's going to want to get it down to the feet for sure, and Benoit definitely has the power to knock him out. This is kind of like a lower top 15, top 20 matchup for lightweight. I think this could be really fun. So I wouldn't mind that fight either. I think that might kind of be the best fight for Benoit here. And it'll give him a chance to hone his game against somebody who's not quite as dangerous and isn't going to punish you for mistakes quite to the level that Dustin Poirier did. Like I said that he would, by the way. Tiny mistakes against Matt Favola, huge mistakes against Dustin Poirier. Said it in the video. If you didn't watch it, that's your bad. Let's break down this Kevin Holland MVP fight. Holland got styled on the entire fight. Holland was even doing so bad at solving MVP that much like Suga was doing in the main event, MVP was even doing shit that he never does, like spinning elbows and shit. He was just way too fast for Holland. And so talking about matchups for MVP and Holland, I don't really want to matchmake Holland, but there was one fight to me that made a lot of sense, and it might seem kind of like a weird pick to a lot of you guys and kind of obscure, but I really fuck with it, and it's kind of like the only fight I want to see for Holland next. But for MVP, him versus Wonderboy could be really fun, but it could also be super ass, so I'm not like super down for that one as like my top pick, but I wouldn't obviously be unhappy to see it at all. Like, I don't think that fight would be boring. I just don't think it would be as good as everyone thinks that it would be, and it could end up being super boring because a lot of MVP's fights against really good opponents do end up being boring. But I don't want to see him against someone else like Holland. So when I say like that, I mean someone who's just going to want to try and swing and bang with him, just stand there and trade. So like a Jeff Neal type, I'm not super interested in seeing him fight anybody like that either. And I'm also not interested in seeing anybody who's going to wrestle him either at all. So let's move on and look at the matchups I have for MVP. So first and foremost, we obviously have Wonderboy. Like I said, this isn't my top option. I think Jack Della Maddalena could be really fun because Jack Della has the cage cutting to actually put MVP in some bad situations positionally. So that could be a really fun matchup to see. And then Ian Gary as well. I think Ian Gary is probably the most interesting matchup. I would love to see how this one goes. And it really is a fight for people with title ambitions because while MVP is certainly going to debut at the rankings lower than Ian Gary, this is going to be a high-profile matchup for Gary. This is an experienced striker who has a ton of momentum behind him as well. And a win with him, with one more win from Ian Gary, and he's in the title picture. And Ian Gary doesn't really want to rush his way to the title either. So this is kind of what I would like to see for MVP. But let me know if you guys think of any other ones for him in the comments below, because since he's debuting in the UFC, there's a lot more matchups to make for him because he hasn't fought anybody here yet. He's just crushed a bunch of cans in Bellator. Let's give Nicholas Dalby a shot at the rankings against Kevin Holland, guys. Kevin Holland's still going to be clinging to his ranking spot, and he had a real stinker of a performance here. He's coming off of 2 stinkers back-to-back then against both Jack Della and the debuting MVP. Nicholas Dalby coming off of 4 wins back-to-back here. The last one stopping Gabriel Bonfim, this huge hyped-up prospect from Brazil, and he stops him. His first UFC loss. Let's give Nicholas Dalby a fucking shot. Let's see if Kevin Holland can handle Nicholas Dalby, or if Nicholas Dalby can get it done, cement himself in the rankings, and make this second run in the UFC worthwhile. I'd love to see this fight. Put this on main card of a fight night. With the quality of these fight night main events and how terrible they are, this could even main event one, and that would be okay-ish with me, I guess. So, Nicholas Dalby. Let's go Nicholas Dalby. Let's talk about Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. Now, wait. Oh, I didn't write any notes for this one. Whoops. Okay, so I'll just talk about this fight. Gilbert Burns and Jack Della Maddalena had an incredible fight with each other. I scored the first round for Jack Della Maddalena, but my friends at my table scored it for Gilbert Burns. It was a kind of an even split, and the judges had it 2-1 favoring Burns. One of them did have it for Jack Della Maddalena, but early on, you saw exactly what happens in most Gilbert Burns fights. He was super energetic, super fast, winging those hooks over the top, and it made him really dangerous in that first round. But you also saw Jack Della Maddalena landing straight punches. And it was in the second round where you really saw Gilbert Burns start to get the timing, not only on his takedown entries, but also on his elbows. He managed to catch Jack Della Maddalena crashing into those and also crashing into some straight punches and get some serious damage off that won him the second round on my scorecard as well as every judge's, which made it to where Jack Della Maddalena would need a finish on 2 of those judges' scorecards in order to win the fight. And it looked like Gilbert Burns had secured the takedown that would win him the fight. He had him against the cage. Jack Della Maddalena went for a Granby roll against the cage, while Gilbert only had control with one underhook. And he managed to get up, and Gilbert went for a really poor shot. He was super obvious that he was going to go for another takedown there, and Jack Della Maddalena wasted no time going for the knee that you can see here on the screen. And he put Gilbert Burns' lights out. So this was not a poor performance from Gilbert Burns in any way, shape, or form. But he got caught by Jack Della Maddalena and finished. And next for Jack Della Maddalena, as I talked about, I would like to see him versus MVP. That's a fight that I wouldn't shy away from. But since I already talked about it, I'll talk about some other matchups that make sense for him. I think him versus Ian Gary is a firework matchup of prospects if you really want to see who's next for a title. I think that makes a ton of sense too, as well as the matchup with MVP. So you could really go either way with that if you end up making MVP versus someone other than Ian Gary. I'd love to see JDM versus him. And since JDM is now in the top 5, if you want him to be one fight away from fighting for the title, so that once Shavkat's out of the way and once Bilal's out of the way, and once the dust is kind of settled from that trilogy of fighters with Leon in the mix, that he's ready up next, put him in there against Kamaru Usman. I think that's a fantastic matchup to see if he's able to handle the grappling of a really credentialed wrestler. I think that Kamaru Usman also has some pretty nice boxing that's slick at times. I don't think that he can really get into a boxing match with Jack Della Maddalena, though, so he'll definitely have to lean on his wrestling to get this matchup done. But this is fantastic. You can put this on a pay-per-view as a co-main event if you'd like to. This would be a fight night main event you could put in a city. You could do this in Australia if you wanted to do it there. That would be an incredible fight night main event to do in Australia. That's a banger fight. But he called out Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think Shavkat should wait for a title shot. But if you told me tomorrow, hey, Dana just got on Instagram Live and he said that he booked Jack Della Maddalena versus Shavkat, I'd be lying to you if I told you I feel anything other than immense excitement to see that fight too. So really anything next for Jack Della, I'm taking it because I'm ready to see what's next for this guy. And oh wow, poor Gilbert. He doesn't get a slide, I guess. So Gilbert Burns' next fight is tough to say. I would like to see Gilbert in. Let's pull up the rankings quickly. We'll go to welterweight and look at the rankings. He might actually be able to get that Colby Covington fight. I feel like Colby's gonna duck him, but I don't think that he'll get that Wonder Boy fight either. So that could be a matchup that could definitely happen. Let's see. Sean Brady. Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady is pretty awesome, and that's like a really intense grappling matchup. Gilbert also hasn't fought Jeff Neal. They're both coming off of a loss, so even though Gilbert's ranked higher than him right now, he's probably going to drop a little bit in the rankings. So I don't mind that matchup either at all. I would say that Jeff Neal, Sean Brady, and Colby Covington would have been on the slide if Gilbert got a slide, but Gilbert doesn't get a slide. Don't look at the matchups at the bottom if you don't want spoilers. Okay. This fight was an absolute banger between Petr Yan and Song Yadong. Early on, you saw some of what I said would happen in my video. Dong was landing his hooks. He had incredible feints for his takedowns, which did lead to him getting enough reads to be able to land some takedowns early. But he never mounted much serious offense against Petr with them. But he did seem to have the better timing over Jan, but he didn't do what I think he would do. And crowd Jan early to make it hard for him to get reads, but instead he let Jan download his data. And you know what Jan does when he downloads his data? He starts getting his timing down. He started landing brutal uppercuts and hooks like you see here. He started having fantastic, just lightning fast takedown entries. They were gorgeous, man. And down the stretch in the third round, neither guy really wanted to give it up at all. But Jan seemed fresher, and he was able to have better timing when they were in the pocket boxing, land the more significant strikes, and even start catching Song Yadong through the second and third with some big elbows that did cut him up too. But I really don't think that Song Yadong lost much stock, so that'll be reflected in the matchmaking for him in this video as well. But let's start off with Petr Yan. So I think that a matchup with Henry Cejudo makes a lot of sense. They're positioned similarly in the rankings. Cejudo coming off of a loss to Merab. They both lost to Merab now. But this could be a fight that makes sense for sure. I expect, again, that Figueiredo will get through Cody Garbrandt, and if he finishes him triumphantly, then I really like to see him versus Petr Yan. This is actually one of the matchups that when I didn't think that they were going to make Petr Yan versus Song Yadong, that I would have liked to see for sure. But this isn't my preferred matchup, I'll say, for Figgy, because I think that Petr Yan fighting Umar Nurmagomedov instead of Corey Sandhagen makes a ton of sense. I think Corey Sandhagen deserves a title shot right now. I think that Petr Yan does not deserve a title shot right now, but that there's not anybody higher in the rankings for him that he hasn't either already fought and lost to recently or beat after he fought them. I.e. Corey Sandhagen. So fighting against Umar would make a lot of sense in my opinion, and would also help either guy cement their spot towards a title shot immensely as well. So I think that that's a matchup that makes a lot of sense too. But moving on to matchup Song Yadong, there's three matchups that make a lot of sense for him. Rob Font, I think, since they haven't fought, they're around the same place in the rankings. That fight's a banger, and you can put that on a fight night main event. Both guys coming off of a loss. Rob Font, a couple of losses, so they definitely both need a rebound. Jonathan Martinez, I think, is a fight that makes a ton of sense too, but it's not necessarily my favorite matchup. But I could definitely see this one making a lot of sense. Jonathan Martinez deserves to be fighting up in the rankings, so giving him someone like Song Yadong still has a lot of stock, makes a lot of sense to me. You'll definitely get somebody who's a very good contender moving forward up in the division out of that matchup. But my favorite matchup is actually Figgy. If he doesn't finish Garbrandt, or even if he does, I really like this matchup. And the main reason I like it is just because stylistically and where they're both at in their careers, it's so interesting because you have Figueiredo, who's a former champion, has his game largely figured out. But you have questions about whether or not athletically, even though he's very strong and can definitely thump, he can hold up with some of the more big and athletic dudes in this division since he's moved up. Whereas you have in Song Yadong pretty much the exact opposite. Somebody who's an athletic freak, but hasn't quite figured out his game entirely yet and still has some holes to fill in with that respect. So I think that that matchup is a banger, just like this card was. Guys, let me know what your thoughts was about UFC 299 in the comments down below. Who is the best fighter on this card and who is the worst performance? I'll go ahead and give those out right now as my runner-ups. My best performance on the card, obviously, Suga Sean O'Malley. I think I'm going to have to give the runner-up to Michael Venom Page, which is tough to say, but Dustin Poirier was losing that fight until he didn't. Jack Della Maddalena was losing that fight until he didn't, and Petr Yan was losing that fight until he didn't. So it would be between Petr Yan and MVP, but Yan wasn't winning his fight as much as MVP was. MVP styled on Holland, so while it wasn't as interesting or entertaining as a win as Petr Yan's was, I will still give it to MVP for the runner-up there. Worst performance on the card has to go to Chito Vera And then following that up, it's going to go to Kevin Holland, who had an embarrassing performance. But let me know what your guys' thoughts were down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like if you like, subscribe for more. Peace out.